everybody turns out okay in the end. All the boys, all the kids, it all turns out beautiful. And all of that happened, 17, 18 years ago. And, it's all hasn't been smooth sailing, but everybody is great.
Hello, and welcome to Prompt, a podcast for people who love story. My name is Amy B., and I'm a writer and one of the creators of In a Nutshell, a monthly storytelling show in Sacramento, California. My co-creators are the world-class comedian Keith Lowell Jensen and the Ska Defender music journalist Aaron Carnes. We get to hear all kinds of great stories, and we want you to hear them too. So every episode, we'll play you a true personal story told at one of our shows, and then we'll talk to the storyteller to not only find out more about the person behind the story, but also discover why they tell the stories they tell. Our story this episode comes from Regina Stoops, comedian, storyteller, disabilities advocate, and one half of 6 Feet Apart Productions. Her story was a vulnerable narrative describing the devastation and rejection she felt when she found out her toddler had autism, and how another son's brush with death took her from a place of rejection to acceptance in one fell swoop. It was a tale that hit home for a lot of the parents in our audience who related to Regina's concern for her children. But it also hit a nerve with the rest of us, not only those of us that have had to learn to embrace their own diagnoses and neurodivergences, but also the very real and universal disappointment humans feel when things don't turn out as expected. Regina's tale is full of grace and wit. She lets us ride along with her experience without pretending her emotions and reactions aren't anything other than what they are. And her willingness to be open with herself and us allow everyone a poignant glimpse of how freeing and relieving acceptance can be. And maybe acceptance is always there, readily available, if we're willing to look. Let's listen to her story.
There he was, up on the wall in the baby department at Target, larger than life. Our 6-month-old, chubby-cheeked baby boy. He was wearing Carter's, a blue onesie adorned with brown teddy bears, and he was totally rocking that look. He was leaning into the camera, had a big smile on his face. He was a natural. This was our son's first gig in his brief modeling career, and we as his parents were understandably proud and elated. And I was amazed because I never thought that I would be a mom. I never thought I'd be a parent. It wasn't that I didn't like kids or I didn't want to be a parent. It's just kind of like being an Olympic gymnast. It just didn't really seem within the realm of possibility. And then I met Diane, and we started to build a life together. And I knew that Diane wanted kids. I think she's a big kid herself, so I think she just really wanted to make sure she had some built-in playmates around the house. And, I was all in. If Diane wanted kids, I was all in to have kids. And I'm the pragmatic one of the two of us. And so Diane would do off on a whim adventures, and I would be the one with the map to try to get us there and get us back. But I could come up with a long list of reasons why this was going to be difficult, not the least of which we were 2 women, so we had a lot of X's and a lack of Y's. But, I was in, and I knew that I loved Diane. So I knew that her happiness would be my happiness, so I was all in with this. And we did it. We pulled it off. We found a known donor, and we managed to get pregnant on the first try. Thank you. And 9 months later, our beautiful baby boy Ryan arrived. And he was perfect. He was and I know every parent thinks that their child is the most perfect, smart, wonderful, awesome baby ever born on the face of the earth. And ours was. And he was chill. He was totally chill. Right? He was such a mellow baby. And he'd wake up in the morning in his crib, and he would just kind of chill there until we came and picked him up. And he never really threw tantrums. He never made any unreasonable requests. I mean, sure, he wanted to be warm, and he wanted to be dry, and he wanted to be safe, and, he got cranky when he got hungry, but don't we all? And he was just a great baby. And we discovered at age 2 that he was really good at shapes. We got him this wooden box, and on each side it had different holes, and you had to find the corresponding block to put in the right opening. And this wasn't just, circles, triangles, squares. Those are for novices. This one had like diamonds and stars and octagons and pentagons and all the gons and rhomboids and rhombus, and he loved that toy. He mastered that toy. We also discovered that he was good at sorting, and so we could take the utensil drawer, put it on the ground, and he would empty the knives, forks, and spoons out of the dishwasher. Now, just the butter knives, okay? Because, yes, we were first-time parents, but even we knew a toddler should not be handling the steak knives, okay? When he was about 2.5, he was at the pediatrician on just a checkup, and he'd been kind of late to hit his milestones, late to crawl, late to walk, and at 2.5, he had some words, but he wasn't really putting together sentences, and so she suggested that we go see a speech therapist, and she wasn't worried. Boys tend to talk later than girls. We weren't worried. I mean, he had 2 moms. He could barely get a word in edgewise. So off we went to the speech therapist, and I remember that day. I remember it was this warm, beautiful fall day. It had that deep blue sky, and the leaves are coming down off the trees, and they're making that sound as they blow across the parking lot, and they're crunching under our feet as we walk in, and I'm holding Ryan's hand, and the speech therapist's office had all these toys and books and puzzles, for the kids, and it had a grown-up chair and a desk in one corner, and then a little table and chair in the other corner, which is where I was sitting, like scrunched down. And she starts asking me questions, and meanwhile, Ryan's just wandering around, and he's checking out everything and pretty much ignoring us. And so she's asking me, like, were there any complications with his birth? And when did he crawl? And when did he walk? And when did he talk? And how many words do you think he has? And I'm starting to feel like I'm taking a test. I've got like butterflies in my stomach. I've got sweaty palms. And I feel like I'm taking a really big test in a really teeny tiny chair. And I'm nervous. And then she looks at Ryan, and then she looks back at me, and she says, "Does he do that hand flapping thing very often?" And I said, well, yeah, when he's excited. And Ryan had just discovered an airplane, and he was in full hand flap mode because he's very excited about airplanes. And I said, yeah, he does that when he's excited, like now. And finally she said, I think he needs to be seen by a developmental pediatrician. And that is when I knew. I don't even know what I knew, but I knew. When I had been in college, I had volunteered at a camp for developmentally disabled kids. And I had tried really hard not to see how some of Ryan's quirky behaviors mimicked the campers, as I remembered. And she went on talking, yada, 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 lots of acronyms and different things, and I really wasn't hearing her at this point. I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, and I felt like I was up above. I was looking down on it, and I could see Ryan, and I could see her, and I could see the big desk and the little table and chairs, and I could see that I really did look ridiculous in that little chair. And we left the office, and we walked out into that same beautiful fall day, same sky, same leaves. I'm holding onto the same boy's hand, only it feels like it's a completely different boy, as if the one I walked in with has been swapped out for a different version. And I called Diane, and she said, well, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong. And I really wanted to think like Diane. I really did, but my experience was just telling me something different. We had to go to Children's Hospital in Oakland for the appointment, and the developmental pediatrician's office was a lot like the speech therapist. It had toys and books and a big chair and table and a small chairs and tables. And she asked me some of those same questions, and then she sat down with Ryan, and she looked at a picture book, and she would say, Ryan, where's the truck? And he could point to the truck. And then she'd point to another picture and say, Ryan, what's this? And he couldn't say it's a car, but if you said, where's the car? He could point to the car, but he couldn't say it. And then she did some physical tests, had him walk up and down stairs and different things. And, all the while I'm looking at this, and I'm just willing him to not flap his hands, to not walk on his toes, to speak. because now I'm seeing all the things I never wanted to see. About a week later, we got a big report back, and the takeaway was Ryan was diagnosed with autism. And it was devastating. I think, more for me than Diane, not that she cared any less. She was just able to frame it much better than I. She was one to take action, and how are we going to take care of this and solve this and fix this? And I knew this wasn't something that was going to be solved or fixed. I knew that we had taken a detour and we were now on a different path, and maybe we could smooth out the path, but we weren't going to get back, on the original path. Something had fundamentally changed. And I felt like I was going through the stages of grief. I was mad, I was angry, I was sad, and I felt like something had been taken away from me. And I felt really horrible that I felt that way. And I thought, is it because I'm not the birth mom? Why am I feeling this way? Why am I feeling, so bad about this? And, there's no cure for autism. There's therapies, of course. There are things that you can do, but there's no out-and-out cure. And so it seemed that all the things that I had assumed about Ryan now were being called into question. Like, would I ever have a conversation with my son? Would he talk? Would he read? Would he write? Would he graduate from high school? Would he get a driver's license? Would he have friends? Would he even want friends? Would he get married? Would he go to college? Would the world be kind to him? I had a coworker who used to, when she wanted to make a derogatory comment about somebody, she'd call him short bus. And I never got that. And I finally said, why do you call people short bus? And she said, short bus. That's what the special ed kids, the retards ride, the short bus. And I never liked that joke in the first place, but now I really didn't like it because chances are I had a son who was going to be riding the short bus. Well, about a month after Ryan's diagnosis, I take his younger brother, Jack. Yeah, we'd had another one. Look at us smug lesbians producing children. And in fact, at that moment, Diana's pregnant with our third. I discovered I had a unique gift for impregnating women. But Jack, he's 18 months old, and he's got a cough, and he's got a fever, as he often did. And so we go off to the pediatrician, and, she prescribes the obligatory, gallon jug of amoxicillin for him and does a breathing treatment. And then she's looking at his file, and then she looks at me, and she said, I really think we need to test him for cystic fibrosis. Exactly. And I looked at her. I think my face must have said it all. I was like, what the hell? Do you not remember a month ago? Autism? Ryan? And she said, I don't think he has it, but we really need to test and we need to be sure. So back to Children's Hospital in Oakland, this time with Jack. And the test for cystic fibrosis, it's not a painful test, thank goodness. It's called the sweat chloride test. And so they put something on Jack's little arm to make it sweat, and then they put this like a spirally tube to collect the sweat. It's like a reverse IV, essentially. And then they wrap it all up, and you just have to go and wait for an hour to collect enough sweat. And so we're sitting in the cafeteria, and Jack is, he's eating his Cheerios one at a time, very methodically, deciding if it's mouth-worthy or floor-worthy. And I'm trying to just be present. I'm trying to just be in the moment and be with Jack and not go down the rabbit holes. But I can't escape the irony that Ryan, while physically healthy, has just been diagnosed with a developmental disability. And Jack, neurotypical, chatting up a storm, he might have a chronic, life-shortening illness. It takes about 10 days to get, that we had to wait for the results. And during that time, I was just like fixated on the what if he has it, what if he has it, and going down assorted, rabbit holes. And my Catholic guilt starts to kick in, Is this like God's punishment, the hubris of two women having all these kids? And I know that's not how it works. I know in my heart that is not how it works, right? But unfortunately, I had moved out of my heart and had taken place permanent residence in my swirling, obsessive rabbit hole brain at this particular moment. And The weird thing, so the way my brain works is, a little factoid of knowledge will get lodged in there, and then maybe, 10 years later, it'll just pop out, right? Unbeknownst to me, it'll just, there it is. And in this case, the thing that popped out for me was Schrodinger's cat. Okay, so I'm not real clear on it, right? It has to do with quantum physics, but basically, there's a box, and it's in a cat. There's a cat in the box, and there's something in the box that can kill the cat, right? And you seal it up, and until you open the box, you don't know if the cat is dead or if it's alive. So technically, it's both dead and alive. And that is how I felt about Jack. I felt he was both healthy and not healthy at the same time, and we weren't going to know the answer until we opened up the test result box. And when the phone rang, finally, and I see that it's the doctor's office, and I hesitate before I pick it up, because if it's positive, I just want to have a few more seconds of not knowing. So I finally answer the phone, and the test is negative. Jack does not have cystic fibrosis. And I was so relieved, and I picked him up and I squeezed him tight, hugged him until he got squirmed out of my arms, and slid down my leg and scampered off. And I looked over and I can see Ryan, and he's over and he's in the corner and he's just quiet and he's chill and he's lining up his trains and he's just being Ryan. And at that moment, I felt this monumental shift inside me. And the thing that popped into my brain at that moment was the pivotal part of When the Grinch Stole Christmas. And it's the part where he finally gets the true meaning of Christmas. And his heart grows 3 times, boom, boom, boom. And he finds the strength of 10 Grinches plus 2. And in that moment, I got it. I got that Ryan was the same beautiful, wonderful, perfect baby he had always been. He was the same chill, shape-sorting, hand-flapping, wonderful child that I fell in love with the moment that I saw him. And the autism had been the worst thing ever until it wasn't. Thank you.
Is your story about acceptance?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it is about acceptance and perspective and just having to work through tough stuff.
Yeah. You took us to acceptance, but in order to get us, the audience, at acceptance, you kind of had to reveal what you called the devastation of the diagnosis, right? In order to have that acceptance payoff, you had to show us this thing that maybe isn't the most flattering emotion to share with people. And so how did you decide to do that? Were you just decide right away you were going to be very candid and blunt, or did you want to fluff it up a little, or what was your thinking on that?
I think I knew that ultimately I would have to reveal how devastated and how much I felt, ripped off. To be honest, I mean, I feel like crap when I say that. I mean, I felt horrible, But I do. I remember walking out of that office, and it was like a completely different kid that I had, and I think having worked with children with special needs, I knew I could sort of in my head project out, and I knew that, again, there wasn't a cure. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I knew, and in my head, everything had changed, and that was just such a visceral reaction that I had.
I assume that you've told this story before on stage?
I have, yes.
And so was that, or even when you did it at Nutshell, was it scary to do that, to reveal that, or? It
is. I've only done it a couple times, to be honest, and even just, when we listen to that story back, on stage, I don't get sort of as choked up, because you're on stage and you're like in the moment, and you just can't, but when I listen to that, it's still, it gives me a very, emotional kind of reaction to that. And I think obviously because I was able to come out on the other side and the acceptance, and because now that we're 17 years on and things are wonderful,
Yeah.
it's certainly much easier to tell that story. I couldn't have told that story, I don't know, even 5 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, no, I don't think I told that story for the first time till probably maybe 3 years ago.
Because you were so honest and candid in what you were feeling, I think all of us noticed that a lot of people came up and talked to you after the show.
They did.
What did they have to say to you?
Well, it was a range. It was people who either had a son or a nephew or a cousin, somebody that they knew who was special needs or who had autism. Several people who were teachers or teachers' aides, in special education, and just really, thanked me for the story and the honesty, and just kind of to more like, we know what you mean. That sort of kinship. I mean, when you're a special needs parent, there's a bit of a club, that you're in. And so, or if you're a teacher or someone who works with that group of students. So yeah, it was a lot of really heartfelt sharing. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like telling that story. And I have a few other stories that are, kind of a little deeper, I guess I'd say, that the connection that it makes with the audience.
Yeah.
What about, have you heard from people who are themselves neurodivergent?
I have not. It's more, no, but it's interesting. I have had a couple of people. I have a bumper sticker. It's the whole different topic. I used to joke that I had so many causes in my life I didn't have enough room on my bumper, so I made my own logo. And in the logo is the autism jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah.
Okay. And I've had a couple people come up, somebody working at Safeway that came up, and they were autistic, and they had seen that and, asked about it and connect and came up to tell me that,
Oh.
I see you. We're connected because you have an autism thing on your bumper. So in that regard, yes, I have had people, but mostly at shows it's people who know somebody
Right.
who has it.
Did you have more to that, Keith? Or
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot of emotions. I'm neurodivergent, and I should explain that I'm also going through some with my mom right now, so forgive me. I'm feeling more emotional than I thought I would. That story, listening to you tell it, it was such an interesting perspective, because they didn't have, they still don't have a clear diagnosis for me. The ADHD is confirmed, the autism is suspected. With my daughter, same. And so it's so interesting to be on both sides of that. I watched my mom struggle, and I watched my mom, when I got expelled in 3rd grade, it's like, what am I going to do with him?
Yeah.
And she had 4 other kids to raise, in the same situation as you, where you have other kids that also are requiring your attention. And so it was a interesting perspective for me to hear, as someone who has been the child with, I think, a different level of needs, but definitely with special needs, and then also a parent,
Yeah, I think it's interesting to hear the perspective of someone who lived it. I mean, I saw my son live it. I see it every day, but I'm not him.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's I know that there's whole other stories I could tell about my other 2 kids and how they did feel at times slighted,
right?
because it was a lot of energy being put to Ryan, or that he'd only eat at certain restaurants. So whenever we went down the I-5, we had to stop at Denny's. There was nobody, it's just those kinds of things. And every once in a while, they would just push back, about that.
yeah.
He gets almost more votes.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I can't, I don't know. There was one time Ryan, he wasn't speaking, so we were doing sign language. And at one point he asked for like more of something, or he said, thank you, or please. Or he asked for milk, and I'm like, oh, oh, he asked for milk, like, and Jack's like, he asked for milk, you throw a parade. I'd like some milk.
Is he sardonic?
He's so sardonic. Oh my God, I can't even tell you. I love that boy and his sense of humor. Unbelievable. But yes, so there were times when it's like, why do you always pick us up after you pick up Ryan from school? Well, the reason is because that one time that he didn't want to wait and he decided to walk home and we didn't know where he was for 2 hours.
Yeah.
But yes, there was definitely, some of that. But
I noticed when we were watching the story that the part where you reveal that Jack might have cystic fibrosis elicited the strongest response from you.
Yeah. I think, and I don't know if that's because, I'm so used to Ryan having autism. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of weird to say it that way, but that's just like the norm now. And when I think back in that period, I think the most upsetting part of it, in hindsight, is Jack possibly having, a life-shortening illness. And I think it's because now, of course, I know how it's turned out with Ryan so far. I know how it is. So hearing that he has autism in the hindsight isn't as devastating as just thinking what would it have been like if Jack had had cystic fibrosis.
Yeah. And that moment when you were waiting to find out as well, it's so different once you've already been through the experience of waiting to find out and then it was positive. Like, all of a sudden it becomes, sometimes the answer is positive.
Yeah.
I think we like to tell ourselves that it's just going to be a scare. It's going to, just the expression, it'll be okay. We say that to ourselves all the time. But to have the experience of, sometimes it isn't.
Sometimes it's not. It's interesting, Amy, when you asked that question about the audience coming up and talking to me.
Yeah.
When I was telling that story, I could just see, there's a couple times, I think probably when I said the result was negative, where it's almost like audible.
Yeah.
Or when I said, that, and I've had this happen where the doctor says, we need to test him for cystic fibrosis, and you hear this in the audience. And one woman did come up to me afterwards, and she was a teacher, I think, or an aide, and she saw it coming because the way I'm describing Ryan, I could see, she was kind of like, so that was interesting.
Wow. I actually was kind of curious about the clues that like this kind of denial that I guess you were in. You mentioned it, but I was wondering about like the reality of that. Like, were you literally seeing stuff that you kind of knew, you had the information to be able to put together, but you were resisting it? Or was it more like a retrospect, everything falls into place?
I remember, at the time, particularly the hand flapping, because that's a pretty sort of standard tell of special needs kids and kids on the spectrum, and I had worked with that population, so that was a big one. And just his not really interested in other kids, socially wasn't really interested, and our neighbors had a little boy that was just a few months younger than Ryan, and so to see the two of them and the marked difference between the talking and the socialization and all that kind of stuff. I definitely had a suspicion at the time that something was up. I don't think I knew autism per se, but that something was up.
I see. Yeah. And how do you I assume you've shared the story with your family?
I have. They well, and by family, you need the other boys, or?
Sure, your immediate family. I know Diane's heard it.
Yeah, Diane's heard it.
She's heard it.
I think, yes. So I have, and Jack, of course, knows the story about him and having to have him tested and how that all, kind of plays out. He knows that story. I don't know if they've heard it from beginning to end.
Oh.
I think they probably are like, yeah, we lived it. We were there.
Since Diane does play a part in the story, we were wondering if she would have told the story differently, and how she would have told it differently.
I'm sure she would have told it differently. I have no doubt that she would have told. And her perspective always is, I'm always half empty. She's always like overflowing. Right, that's the yin and the yang of us, and it's it's balanced out for 35 years.
Yeah.
So, but she again, like I said in the story, she was very much like, well, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong, and we're gonna solve this and it's going to be okay. And that's, her 100% her attitude. And thank God for that, because if it had been two of me, and I do think she was able to have that too, because she didn't have my perspective from having worked with special needs kids, and because I was the one who was going to the appointments and going. So I was kind of getting it firsthand versus secondhand. And again, like I said, it didn't mean that it didn't mean anything any less to her. She was just able to frame it and experience it different than I did.
Is there a process of like almost, I don't know, getting permission when the story that you're telling, it's your story. You have a right to tell your story, but you share your story with other people.
But Diane knew what story I was going to tell when we went to In a Nutshell. And if she had said, I don't want you to tell that story, well, then I wouldn't have told the story.
Has that ever happened, or has there ever been like a part of a story that she's like,
Well, yes, there have been parts of stories that she didn't want, she preferred I not tell. I want to respect that, because you're right. I mean, she's involved in the story, even if she's not named in the story, she's part of the story.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our regular episode, but our paid subscribers, hang in there, because we've got more for you. Additional content coming up right now.
Okay, so let's kind of backtrack a little and just say, so you started in stand-up, right?
I did. I started in stand-up.
And can you tell us some stuff about that? And
like how long ago, first off?
Oh, Lord, mid-90s.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, no, I had been to a Olivia Club Med with all the other lesbians in the Bay Area. And they have, entertainers.
You say that like we know. Please tell us about Olivia Club Med. I had no idea there was a lesbian paradise.
In Mexico, of all places. Well, no. So Olivia cruises, really big back, I don't know, 80s, 90s. I don't even know if they're a thing anymore now. That was back when more, gays and straights were more separated when it came to things like travel and so you went on an Olivia cruise so you could go with the other lesbians and there'd be entertainment, and it was just a big fun time. And then they did them also at Club Meds where you could go. Same thing. So all women, all gay, and they'd have entertainers come, and it was like a cruise on land, And so we went to one in probably the mid-90s, and Diane Amos happened to be one of the entertainers that was there. And there was a talent night, and I got up and decided to do 5 minutes. I'd never done comedy before, but I wrote a little bit. And afterwards she came up, and she was very kind and said, do you do this? And I said no. And she said, well, you did pretty well. You maybe ought to think about coming into the city and doing some open mics. Josie's Cabaret and Juice Joint in the Castro has an open mic, yada yada. So I started doing that, and it just kind of went from there. At first I was usually doing like gay pride events. I got out of comedy after, I don't know what, 5, 8, whatever years, and just because at that point I think we had 3 kids, and I was the stay-at-home mom. So I was busy. So then I got back into I started doing improv, because that's really easy. You just show up and and you don't have to think about writing material or anything else.
You don't have to be funny.
And you don't have to be funny.
Shots fired.
And so then probably when our oldest son was about 7 or 8, and I'm hanging out with the special ed world, there was a nonprofit that was doing a fundraiser at Tommy T's Comedy Club, which is here in Pleasanton, and somebody knew I used to do comedy, and so asked me if I wanted to, open and do 7 minutes or whatever, and I did, and I realized, 1, I really missed it, and 2, I had a whole lot of new material, so I started doing special needs events and nonprofit events, and I still do a lot of that. That's primarily what I do. If I'm going to do comedy, it's usually in the special needs organization realm. And then when I diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, I got a lot of material. I started incorporating that into my comedy, because that's really funny stuff.
Yeah.
So you had like 4 full humans worth of content.
I did.
Of new content.
I did. Yeah. All me, but all, yeah.
How did you seg into storytelling?
So how did I start it? Well, of course, I've listened to The Moth and storytelling and all that. And I really enjoyed more narrative type of comedy anyway.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And I was writing a blog. I have a blog, reginastoops.com, and a lot of the stories that I'd written, I thought, well, maybe I would be like to get up and, you know, tell the stories on stage. And I have a good friend of mine who's like, well, let's go to the Moth in Berkeley, and you throw your name in the hat. And so I had a story to tell. And I got picked the first time I was there. I didn't realize how rare that was.
Yeah.
I got picked the first time I was there and got to tell and won. And so then I thought, oh, well, that's how it happens all the time. But anyway, I really enjoyed being able to tell a longer form story that could be funny or not funny. You know, I could work humor into it.
Yeah.
And I just really fell in love with that format versus, you know, stand-up comedy.
So like 5 minutes felt like a lot to you at that point, because comedy's kind of quicker. You have to do shorter bits.
Right.
So 5 minutes was like, yay.
And I like that, you know, when you do comedy, you have to be funny every so many seconds.
Yeah.
You can't, you know, the audience is there to laugh. And with storytelling, you can tell a story and not be funny for a couple of minutes. But if you're painting a good picture and your story is kind of compelling, then the audience is still with you. And you can lighten it up with certain, at time to time. But you just don't have to worry about being funny, and that allows you to just dig deeper into a story.
Yeah.
Can I go back to when you were at that Olivia Club Med event and to what?
There's a lot of women in bikinis, Keith. Okay, a lot of
that's
women
what
in
I wanted.
bikinis.
No, what made you? Because you just said very matter of factly, they did a talent night and decided to get up and do comedy. You know, that's nerve wracking for people. Is it something you'd always wondered if you could do? Were you a big comedy fan? Why did that happen?
You know, I
Drunk.
I've always drunk. I've always been comfortable, I think, in front of people, like in a stage. And I worked for a company that had company retreats, and every company retreats there were 3 different divisions, and we had like this variety show where we all got up and did skits, and we always tried to funny the other ones, and I really liked that. So I think I just thought, well, this will be interesting to do. And I think the thing I did was because I was born and raised in Normal, Illinois, so a town called Normal. So my funniest by far bit starter is about being, you know, from Normal, and so I came up with that, and then it just sort of went from there.
You went from Normal to Pleasanton.
I went from Normal to Pleasanton.
Wow.
I know, right?
What a trajectory.
Geographically, I haven't moved far from Normal, but life experience.
I know this is kind of all over the place. How Diane knew she wanted kids, and you, I guess, well, it wasn't really that you knew you didn't want kids. It was more like...
I didn't really think, you know, at some point it was like, okay, well, I'm probably not going to, you know, marry a guy and have kids, so I guess I'm not having kids. And again, when I met Diane, it was back in the, you know, the early 90s, and 2 women having a baby wasn't as, I want to say common as it is now, but, it was a different time. So yeah, I knew that Diane wanted kids. She came from a big family. She's a big kid. She loves kids.
So she told you right from the start. You knew when you guys got in a relationship that...
Yeah, I think when we were, you know, I don't know that we ever, you know, it wasn't one of, like on first date, okay, so paper, plastic, chicken, beef, vegan, and do you want to have kids? But at some point, you know, I knew that she wanted, and we talked about adoption, and we talked about doing that, and I think I finally said to Diane, you know, if you really want to have kids and you want to have a baby, you want to actually have a baby, then that's what we should try to do. You know, not. In other words, I didn't want her to regret going one route because she thought maybe it would be easier, whatever, societally, family-wise, whatever. But if she really wanted to have a baby, then that's what we should try to do.
So I just frame of reference for anyone younger that's listening. I mean, at that point, there's no same-sex marriage. I think even what was it called? A domestic partnership was something that was still being fought for, right? I mean,
domestic partnership. I couldn't tell you when that became a fact without pulling our domestic partnership papers, but there was that, and there was no. I mean, when our first boy was born, it was just Diane's name on the birth certificate, and then I had to adopt him in order to have a birth certificate with both our names on it, and the biological father had to give away his.
David Crosby?
Yeah. He was busy with Melissa, so he said, sure, no problem. So they had to give up their rights because you can't have 3 legal parents, etc.
Okay.
And then by the time our third son was born, my name could just go on the birth certificate.
So you did. You got to like firsthand witness quite a bit of progress.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And we did get legally married when that came around, when we were able to do that. So we've kind of been through all that, the domestic, Prop 8, I'm hoping the pendulum doesn't swing back the other way. But,
oh my God.
I know.
Did you experience any negative things as being like a lesbian parent, or was it, because of where you live, it wasn't a big issue?
It wasn't a big issue, I have to say. Most people, I always feel that if people didn't really agree with it, or they just kind of didn't say anything, or didn't hang out with us or whatever. But nothing in the schools. I don't think my kids were like bullied, or I think the other kids in the elementary school were just like, you got 2 moms, all right. They just didn't think much of it, and the teachers really were very accepting and went out of their way. And like on Family Day, our version of the family tree was mom and mom instead of mom and dad, and I'm pretty sure that she designed that just for us. And we had blessedly we had a very good experience, and I'm really glad my kids are just like
Yeah, there's this whole thing about what if my kid's exposed to that? I said, your kid will find it boring.
Yes, that's
like it's. Like you said, you have 2 moms. Okay, and now on with the hopscotch or whatever.
Exactly, they don't care. I remember being in the minivan, and my youngest son's in the back seat with his friend, and all of a sudden I hear his friend say, "Well, you can't have 2 moms." And my son says, "Well, I do." And his friend says, "Well, do you want to play Minecraft when we get home?" Right? So that's just it. Kids are just like, I was volunteering in the 2nd grade, like, I don't know, math centers or something, and we're going around the table, and some girl, I think, asked, because Diane had been there maybe the week before, so it's like, well, are you so-and-so, are you mom? Well, yeah, I'm mom. And she's like, well, you weren't here last week. And finally I had to be like, well, he has 2 moms. Let's like move on, right? And then she's like, so are you married? She's like, I'm like, well, yes, we are.
She pulls out her cigarette.
I know. She's like,
so tell me, she gives you a martini.
Was it a big wedding? I'm like, oh my God. I told the teacher afterwards, like, look, I don't know if you're going to get any pushback from a parent, but I just have to tell you that I had to describe my lesbian wedding to the math circle, okay?
So I'm curious how you feel about the sort of this new push of TV shows that are portraying autism and stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really, I'm going to say I swing back and forth on it. On one hand, I think it's positive that the word autism is being spoken on national television or wherever, and that people are seeing some of the quirks of it, I guess. But on the other hand, I call that Hollywood autism, and that just is not the world that I live in, and it's not the world that a lot of people live in. And so the downside to that is if people think that, oh, well, people with autism are like the good doctor, they can do this, they can do anything. And, the parents that have kids that, still have kids that are older, they're adults now and are nonverbal, or they're putting their fists through the wall, or they're violent, or they've had to put them in institution or someplace because they're so violent and they have other siblings. Nobody's showing them on TV.
Yeah.
And the fact that there's no services for them, there's no housing for them, it's just, that's a whole different podcast. But so on one hand, I'm glad that word is being said and that, but on the other hand, there's a whole part that's not being seen at all.
It almost feels like in an effort to normalize autism, they're almost kind of softening the fact of how much it can be challenging for people.
Right. I mean, that's exactly it. And it's not good TV let's do a story about a nonverbal headbanger who's spreading feces across the living room wall, and his parents have to, lock the doors and windows, and,
It's they use the word spectrum so much, but they only want to show one end of it.
They only want to show one end of the spectrum. Yeah, exactly. And so, and there are documentaries and there's stories. It's not that those stories don't exist that you can't, but they're not on network TV or Netflix or anything like that. So yeah.
I had an experience like it's kind of the opposite of that. So I have a port wine stain, as you can see, and somebody reached out to me on Instagram that they claimed that they were from TLC or something, and that they're putting together a show about people with port wine stains. They want to talk to me, and I was pretty sure I wasn't interested, but I was curious to take the phone call, and I kind of knew where it was going. They asked me a lot of questions. I grew up, and my birthmark was never an issue for me. It was never a source of discomfort, and I was never looking to have it removed. And the fact that I told them that, they said, well, you're not what we're looking for. I mean, they didn't say it quite that bluntly, but basically it's like they were only looking for people who have had horrible experiences with having a birthmark on their face, and the idea of having it removed was going to solve their life. And I was like, I didn't really say this to them, but after I was like, that's so like such doing a disservice to people that we exist. Like, some people don't like their birthmark, other people have had an experience where it's not anything at all.
Right. So what does that show tell some 5, 6, 7-year-old who has a birthmark who
like this is something
this is
to
really
feel bad about.
It's almost teaching them to feel bad about it.
And in fact, one of my experiences growing up was people would ask me about it, and they would say, I'm sure you've had a rough life. And I'd say, I did not have a rough life, actually.
Thank you very much. I did, but it had nothing to do with
nothing with my face.
Yeah, really, nothing to do with
I'm having a rough time talking to you right now.
Well, I try. Again, when my son was applying for college, he got the old essay, right? College application essay. And we're like, buddy, you got a gold mine here. You got 2 moms, you got 2 dads, you got a special needs brother, you got a mom with a chronic illness. I'm like, this is gold. This is college gold, buddy boy. You got to lean way in on this, And we kept pushing and pushing, and he kept pushing back, and he finally said, you guys, if it had been traumatic, if I had been bullied, if it had been a big ordeal, I would write about it, but it was just my life. And I was like, all right, well, I guess I can't argue with that.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
Congratulations.
To you.
I know, that's I thought, well, okay, yeah, that's good. That's a win. Let's take that as a win.
I want to know what magic you're using, because we've done a few of these now.
Well, I do a lot of facials. No, I'm sorry, what?
Both Aaron and I have probably shared more personal stuff in this one than any other interview. Is this what you do to people? Is this the effect you have on?
Well, I guess people can be certainly comfortable, because I've clearly just spilled like a deeply personal thing.
Is that what it is?
I think that's it. I mean, I have to think that it's that, I think vulnerability, you can be vulnerable with someone who's willing to be vulnerable with you. That's my that's my sense anyway. And it's interesting, because getting up on stage and telling that story, I mean, I feel good about it, but when I listen to it, I'm like, it kind of guts me again and again. Like, it's almost like I can't listen to it. I don't know. I mean, I think there is something, I have to say, when people come up after and talk to me, I feel good about than having told that story, or it helps me in some way. I don't know. But again, I couldn't have told that story years ago.
Yeah.
You know, you have to, what is it saying? You have to wait until it's a scar. You can't tell
Right.
it started,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
And so that's, you know, I think that's what that is. And I think I mean, I always joke that comedy and the storytelling, it's like my form of therapy, if nothing, you know, just happen to be talking to 300 people
Yeah.
about my deepest personal, darkest secret. I have to show this. Okay, where am I? All right, so I mentioned my logo. Anyway, it makes great radio. But anyway, this is the one I made. So it's that because I'm from Normal.
Excellent.
And I did this whole running joke about I need one that, you know, I'm a gay, Catholic, lesbian, suburban soccer mom. I got an autistic son. And now
Those
I have
must be
MS.
doing well.
You know, they come and go. I mean, if I'm at a show or I'm doing something and I'm selling them, I do. But most of the time, I just, give them away. So this was the original logo, and I show this, and then when I talk about MS, I'm like, I know you guys, because when I say, oh, I diagnosed with MS, you sort of get that from the audience. And I'm like, no, it gets funnier. I said, but I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, God, that poor woman. She had that great logo. What is she going to do now?
Right, where's she going
I
to
was
put
like,
that
well,
in?
I just now I'm Miss. So
Miss.
you can all have your very own one of those.
Oh, yay!
Miss MS, I just got that.
Yeah.
Are you
Piles
still
of magnets. So take whatever you
Thank
want
you.
and pass them out. I
Are
love
you
to
still
see them.
actively Catholic?
I am. Yeah, there's a whole nother podcast. Yeah, I am actively Catholic. And,
As a lapsed Catholic, that's fascinating to me.
well, it's interesting. It really is. Diane was a cradle Catholic. I was a cradle Catholic, and it's people. I've had people. I did this whole shtick one time in a show at somewhere, and someone came up and like they really honed in on the like. I can't believe that you're Catholic. I'm like, really? Out of all that,
Right.
all that, it's the Catholic you're amazed about. Yeah, we just have, it's unbelievably, I mean, Pleasanton, it's been a very wonderful, welcoming community. I actually teach faith formation for developmentally disabled kids at the church, and Diana's been a lector. Our youngest son is now a lector, and it's just been a really good place and a source of comfort for us, but I certainly know that that's not the case at every Catholic church. And I always equate it, it's like, well, I don't really like the management of the United States, but I'm not leaving. So, think local, act globally.
That's pretty good.
Act local,
That's a
think
good
globally,
comeback.
whatever
Yeah.
that is.
So you can be a lapsed Catholic and still do all the Catholic stuff?
Well, I'm not a lapsed Catholic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
I
she's
missed
lapsed
that part.
Catholic.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was lapsed.
Yeah.
No, so for us, and I mean, all three of our boys were baptized and went through First Eucharist, and they've been, the whole 9 yards. I mean, when I, well, it's not in this one. I do a bit about, anyway, I won't go, that's a whole other podcast. But yes, it is interesting, and I have had people come up and are amazed by that.
So my daughter and I can go to Mass with you.
Sure.
It's something that was such a big part of my life as a kid that she has no experience with at all. She's never been, and I would like her to experience it.
Yeah, and so our oldest son, he goes, a lot of times they do online Mass, 10 a.m. They stream it online, so he'll do that a lot. Our youngest son goes on probably more regular than I do. And then our middle son is like, he's the very much practical-minded one, and he's like, no, if I could carbon date the cross, I might believe it, but I'm not. He doesn't, the faith thing. I keep trying to explain him about faith in something. So they're all, they all took away from it what they took away from it.
When I watched your story at Nutshell for the first time, and when you said that you were devastated, I actually felt for like maybe a second or two, I felt surprised that you said that because of the conversation we had, because I'm watching this sort of media acceptance of autism to where I'm starting to feel like you're not supposed to say that. And I was wondering if you feel that pressure at all, or has anyone said to you you're not supposed to say that?
No, they haven't. And I think if you ask any parent whose child was diagnosed with that or with some other developmental disability, I can't believe there's not a one of them that wouldn't say that was devastating to them in that moment. You know,
Yeah.
now
Yeah,
it's 15 years later, no, but in that moment, because you just don't see it coming, and you make all these assumptions. I mean, you have kids, you make all these assumptions, and who's to say my neurotypical kids are going to do all the things that I
Right.
right? But you have these assumptions, and then those assumptions kind of get sidelined. So, yeah, I mean, they might not use the word devastated, but it definitely has. I can't believe that it wouldn't hit anyone would be like, oh, all right, well, we'll just carry on then.
Right.
There does seem to be a little bit of a push going that way, though, kind of
Yeah.
having that kind of attitude.
So I think now again, it's a much
Yeah.
different time,
Yeah.
right? There's a whole lot of neuro awareness, and there's a whole schism in the autism community itself, because there's ones that we're neurodivergent, and they're proud of it, right? They don't
Yeah.
we don't need a cure, we
Right.
don't need that's totally fine. I mean, I if I could wave a magic wand and Ryan wasn't autistic, I would probably wave the magic wand, and he would probably wave it too. But that's not to say that I think he's less than.
Right.
But yeah, there's kind of this us and them, unfortunately. Reminds me of way back in the day when it's like the lesbians and the homosexual, the gay man didn't get along.
That's totally solved now, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.